and the Eagles are going to win the Super Bowl. Welcome back to The Edge, where we demystify football through the lens of the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm your host, Eagles Eric, and joined by my brilliant co-host, Sam Finkel of Inside the Birds. Today's episode's going to be a little different. We tried to upgrade the production quality a bit, and we're going to pull back the curtain on the world of football analytics, not just the theory, but actual application. And to do that, we're joined by someone who's done both. Former UNC football student assistant and Big Data Bowl semifinalist Matt Polsky. Hopefully I got that pronunciation right. So for those who don't know, Sam was also an assistant at Penn State, so I'm with some esteemed guests here. And Matt's project, titled It's a Bluff, Predicting Receiver Decoy Motions, dives into the murky waters of pre-snap motion. It's something NFL coaches talk about, how there's purpose to motion. And Matt really was trying to dig in and figure out what it really does. So getting into the game plan here. Matt, before we dig into the model, I want to start somewhere that's maybe a little unexpected. You've been on the sidelines and now you're behind the computer. Someone may call you a keyboard warrior. What was the biggest change, transitioning from coaching to analytics? Was there anything that didn't go the way you thought it might?
Yeah, that's a great question. So at UNC, I kind of took on like a GA type of role. I was responsible for like a lot of tagging different plays and keeping like entry of like the data from practice. And the coaches, they didn't really care about numbers all that much. They wanted everything to be categorized. Like what's the front, what's the blitz, where are they blocking to, is it left and right? So that kind of took me by surprise because before that, I never played a single down of football in my life. I'd done like a few football analytics side projects with a bunch of numbers, but kind of learning from the coaching staff what they thought mattered was all the categorical data. So I think it was unique, and it kind of paved my way in analytics to kind of use the numbers to make it, to really simplify it and make it something practical that coaches could find useful and use. So I think that was the biggest takeaway I took from coaching to analytics.
Sam, does that mirror your experience at all?
That's exactly what I was going to say. Like to a T, that it sounds like you're just reading back exactly what I did a couple of years ago. So it's interesting to see that, at different programs, that's kind of a very similar experience in those kind of roles. But to be going towards your actual project, could you tell us a little bit about what the Big Data Bowl is and what it's like participating in it?
Yeah, so the Big Data Bowl is just an open public competition that the NFL has hosted for I think the last 4 or 5 years, with like a $100,000 prize pool, and they provide different types of data, specifically tracking data, which is basically frame by frame of every game. This year was the 2022 season, weeks 1 through 8. They basically give everybody the same prompt or question. This year's theme was about everything pre-snap, using pre-snap statistics to kind of draw conclusions on post-snap outcomes. So that's what the Big Data Bowl is. And I decided to compete in it. I was talking with a mutual connection I had, the Jaguars, and I was trying to ask, like, what's the best way to get into this football analytics space, which is highly competitive. And he just said, do the Big Data Bowl. So I went out and I did it, and I was very fortunate to place really well.
Congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. One of my buddies, Smith, was also a participant, and now he's hired by the Eagles. So, who knows what the future could hold. And I think that's unbelievable experience, and I may participate myself potentially in next year's. So your Big Data Bowl submission was about decoding pre-snap motion, as we mentioned. What made you choose the variables that you did? I noticed you used home and away as a variable. That's something people may gloss over if they're doing analysis. In your study, you cited home field affects communication and motion timing. I just want to learn more about that. What led you to include that? What did it tell you?
Yeah, definitely. So the initial part of my project was just, like you said, to try to predict whether motions are intended for leverage or decoy. And I thought about it kind of through this football lens that I learned at UNC coaching. Like, what's the situation? Like, is it a running down? Is it a passing down? Who is the player motioning? Is he a good player? Is he a fast player? Is he a player that's very underutilized? And then I also used the specific type of motion from the tracking data, like how fast is the max speed? Is he going to the weak side? Is he going to the strong side? That kind of stuff. So under situation, I wanted to think of a few things. Obviously, this is the down, the distance, all of that stuff. But something that I unfortunately have watched as a Miami Dolphins fan is the team get absolutely obliterated and on pre-snap penalties on the road because it's really hard. Like motion is a very new thing. I think there's been a lot more motions every year since like 2022, like Kyle Shanahan. And it's confusing stuff. Like you're trying to get the snap off, you're trying to time the motion. So I just initially hypothesized that, hey, maybe teams kind of notice that and say, let's not run as many decoy motions. Let's only motion if we really need to, if on the road. Whereas at home, they can try a bunch of different stuff because it'll be quiet when they're on offense. And I didn't think that would have as big of an effect as like the down and distance, because obviously the situational stuff is very important. But in the model, if you ran, there's a decoy prediction tool that you can find on the paper. But if you plug it in, it shows that my hypothesis holds like mostly true. Like on the road, the odds of it being a decoy motion are a little bit lower each time. So I thought it turned out with good results.
That's really cool. Little self plug. I wrote an article about offensive coordinators called Architects of Deception, and I put McDaniel in the Motion Masters section. So if you guys are interested, you can check that out on Medium or find it on my Twitter. But I didn't know you were a Dolphins fan, so that's interesting to hear that there's differences in its efficacy depending, even it could be even like you go to Arrowhead or Link, it might be even disproportionately affected. I wonder if you did that like granular analysis, what would show up.
Yeah, definitely. I was thinking about that, but it was just a lot of steps. But yeah, not all home fields are made the same.
Definitely. Right. And how'd you factor rookies into utilization? Obviously, not having like a previous NFL season to analyze.
Yeah, this was kind of a hard part of this. I decided just to simplify it down and just leave them as underutilized because rookie receiver coming in, you don't know. This is kind of like a flaw of the paper is that I didn't have the time to really go through every player and grade them. Like obviously Malik Neighbors for a rookie this year, this would be a very heavily utilized player. Whereas I don't know, like a Malik Washington on the Dolphins, like he wouldn't be a very. So I just thought it would average out to most rookies don't get a lot of action. So it was a little flaw in the paper, but I think it worked out all right.
What I think is kind of fascinating when you're talking about the Dolphins too is especially with McDaniel, like we were talking about, is their emphasis on the cheat motion, and I wonder if that was a big emphasis of why the NFL was looking for this kind of data and had that kind of prompt. Do you think that that's kind of the case, or do you think it was kind of coincidental?
I think it might have just been coincidental. I know motioning is a huge part, but a lot of people did their papers on different stuff, like how the defensive adjusted pre-front. I think Smith wrote his on like detecting man zone. So there's a ton of different ways you could go with this, but motion really intrigued me. The cheat motion really intrigued me to start off in like 2022 when he came. So
yeah. Out of curiosity, was there any others that you like contemplated, or you were like, I know what I want to do right away?
I knew what I wanted to do right away because I've been frustrated with the motions, how it worked so well sometimes, and then other times just looked like the defense just knew what they were doing. So like I'm just going to just go hands on and just try to dive into this problem.
One challenge with any model is accounting for human error. And I'm talking on the field, bad routes, busted coverages, misreads by the quarterback. How'd you wrestle with that fallibility in your model?
No, definitely. That was like the biggest problem I faced with my model because I was using play outcomes not by watching film, but just by using just the stats. So for a run play, I just said that all wide receiver motions were decoys, which obviously doesn't hold true all the time. But my thought process is like you got a receiver in motion, defense is looking at him, he's probably going to try to be in the progression. So if it's a run, he wouldn't be in the progression. And then for the pass plays, I used an expected distance formula to see if the receiver was part of like a primary progression. And obviously that cannot hold true sometimes because we don't know the actual intent of the play. There could be an alert. It could be an alert on the opposite side, a hot route, or anything. So that was definitely a big part of the paper, but I tried to combat it by getting a very diverse range of different variables, like I said, with the situational, motion specific, motion player specific. So that way, if one thing is wrong, we still get data, the correct data on the other 7 things. I was also able to get a lot of different plays because it was weeks 1 through 8. I didn't have to filter out too many plays. So I think it's by like the vast amount of data and the out of sampling techniques that I used that's how I pretty much battled that.
So what I think is particularly brilliant with that is the fact that you saw these issues as they were coming across through the process. And it seems like you did a really good job addressing them. So honestly, really impressive to that. That being said, if there was more data that could have been available, what do you think would have helped with this kind of analysis?
Oh, I would have absolutely loved to know what the intent of the play was. Like if I had the playbook and I knew like, okay, this is what we want to go to against this look, that would have made things so much easier. I went through on the all 22, just took like 20 random plays to make sure that my data process was being right. I got 18 out of 20 labeled pretty correctly. So at 90%, at least on the 20 sample, is pretty good. But it also took me so much time to kind of come up with that process. And it would have been really useful just to know the intent of the play, especially on run plays, because I know that all receiver motions aren't decoys on run plays. I know McVay runs Puka into the C gap a ton on some insert plays, and I feel like those might be miscorrectly labeled. So I think that if I had just had access to the playbooks, I think it would have been a lot better.
Makes a lot of sense.
Sam, I know you were interested in like the application side of the statistical analysis. Did you want to get into that a bit?
Yeah, I would just kind of ask, do you think that this kind of process could be applied to other position groups? And if so, do you think it would be an effective measurement of those position groups?
I definitely do think that. I saw a couple of good papers on some tight end motion. I think that would also be good, just kind of predict whether they're going to be involved in the play as a blocker. You'd have to do some initial analysis because a lot of tight end motions just to get the split block on like a zone play, or they can be used for a bunch of different things. You've been seeing a lot of that. And I think for running back motion, that's pretty interesting. I don't see a lot of like running back like motion, like right. I like sometimes see like a shift and then they'll come back. So I think it would just be kind of a different type of analysis there. But I think that there could definitely be some very applicable projects there. I just didn't have the time to kind of focus on all the position groups.
No, it totally makes sense. And we really love what you came up with. And obviously the Big Data Bowl folks did too.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you guys.
Shack motion or a shift is one of these elements where in a 5 wide, they'll put the running back out on the outside and then shift him back into the backfield for like a man zone indicator. That's something like if you did a reverse of what Smith's project was, you could kind of figure out like, get tells from the defense based off what player they would match up on the running back out there and then shift him back in. So there's so many different areas you could go, even though the constraints with like pre-snap and post-snap predictions was pretty tightly, confined. Is that something that like, as an analyst, you relish the opportunity to like find a novel insight, even though it is pretty tightly constrained, or you'd rather just say, I want to run free and there's no prompting?
Yeah, I think just like for football, like I think the more I got into football, I realized the less I knew about it. So I think just the best way for me to learn is just to go and just get into the specific problem and just do as deep of analysis as possible. And it's all the time, it's not going to turn out like, oh, this actually matters. Like this is actually an indicator of what's going to happen. Like I made all the variables. It took me probably 40 hours to get everything set up. And at the end, it could have been like it could have been like 50% accuracy, which would have been basically a coin flip. It just happened to be that my hypotheses were right. But I feel like there's no way to learn except if you just dive in and just try to, and then you might find some good results. And if you don't, then you learn that it doesn't matter, which is also learning. So
how could your analysis be utilized by both offensive and defensive coaches, especially because it has been, it correlates pretty well?
Yeah, definitely. So I think for defenses, I don't know. I've never been in an NFL front office. I don't know if they're already looking at this kind of stuff, telling their analysts like, hey, but I think for defenses, just knowing these tells is just really important. Like the Tyreek Hill cheat motion, like it's a really good leverage play. Like you're getting your fastest guy out into space and with a favorable amount of matchup. But then you're also telling the defense like, hey, we're probably going to get this ball to Tyreek Hill, and then the defense can adjust that way. It just turns into a game of game theory. So I think the defense can just go ahead and make the first step and know the tells and kind of predict off of that. And then the offenses can look at that and make sure that their motions aren't very predictable. It's like a trade-off between getting your players in good position while trying not to be too predictable at the same time. So I think there's a lot of room for innovation there.
I just thought of something as you were saying that, which is when you have Tyreek Hill coming flying across the formation, you can pretty much intuit what you're going to get there. do you think we're going to see an evolution where maybe they start out fast and then they slow down, or vice versa, start off slow and then turn it into a cheat motion? Is that, I don't, maybe they're already running that and I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen anything like that, but that sounds really cool. Personally, I think that would be very useful because then you can kind of get your pre-snap tells and get the defense thinking one thing and then switch it up. That would kind of be like a next step of like if the defenses are really analyzing these tells and adjusting to them to kind of mess with them and run some different types of stuff.
Absolutely. You know, as someone who's been on the sidelines, you know, you've seen the game from the inside, and we touched on this a little bit earlier, but did that change the way that you interpreted the data now getting onto that side of things? Do you think being on the staff gave you an edge in understanding what really matters potentially versus other people who haven't had that experience?
Yeah, I think it definitely is really important to kind of learn football through both lenses because numbers obviously matter, but like if you're just using numbers, you're not understanding the game. I think the best fusion is just like the film analysis combined with the numbers, so you can kind of explain it and make it interpretable. Like when I was just doing the numbers, I didn't have any interpretation, and that on the coaching staff, you know, football is pretty behind on analytics. I would try to explain like, oh, we should probably get some numbers here, and they're like, we don't have any analysts, so you know, it's just a little bit different, but I think the combination is just the best way to really get everything. I'm really fortunate to have good experience in both of those.
You've worked hands-on with tracking data now. It's pretty cool that they make this available. Otherwise, it's pretty much proprietary data that they don't let anyone have access to. In your experience, which position is most predictive when trying to ID run versus pass, or are there positions that are total noise?
Yeah, I thought so when predicting run versus pass, I initially created a little model for this, just a simple linear model. It's kind of explain like the situational stuff. So I didn't use any like positions, any motions or anything. And I just used like the personnel, offensive personnel, down and distance, score differential. Like there's some downs, like, you know, they're going to run or, you know, they're going to pass. Like Eagles get the ball on the 1 yard line. You know, what's going to happen. There's no surprise to it. So I think a lot of these can just be explained by kind of like the situational stuff, but there are these like ambiguous downs, like maybe like a 3rd and 3 or a 1st and 10, where it is kind of like 50-50. And that's where I found it kind of hard to predict. So I think looking at the different positions there, like the different motioning, any tells you can get pre-snap is definitely worth looking into. I think like if they're just standing still, like a tight end, it's not much to take from it, unless if you want to look at the personnel, like, oh, there's 2 tight ends on the field, you know, that could tell you something. But I think the motion, any motion, it's a great tell, and of the run pass, and should be looked more into.
Yeah, I previously I was in basketball analytics, and we could see that 3-point revolution issuing the mid-range coming from a mile away. And I wonder if we see something similar with motions and shifts. I guess my question is, if you were an offensive coordinator, what percentage of plays, let's call them standard plays, not situational with like red zone or short yardage, standard plays, 1st and 10, would you use motion?
I think it really depends. You got to have the right personnel for it. If I have a bunch of slow receivers, I don't know if I would do it, or if my team really struggled with communication. Like a pre-snap penalty on 1st and 10 is just an absolute drive killer. So there's obviously like the pros and the cons to it. You got to weigh both sides. And I would just, as an analyst, I would try to get as much data as possible, like of a team that's similar to mine, or even just like practice. Like if we're running these plays against the first team defense, and these motions, is there a lot better results with a motion than without one? And it's just worth evaluating at that point. But I really like it for fast receivers. I like it for tight ends that really like to get out into space and block. And if run well, I mean, it's really effective. We've seen that with the Rams, 49ers, 2022 Dolphins, you know. So I think, yeah, but like some teams like the Eagles, who just have such a powerful running game, you just don't want to get behind the sticks on 1st and 10. So if you can basically gain 5 yards of play without having emotion, there's, you know, you don't fix what isn't broken.
And sometimes these motions can trigger coverage checks. So one of the things I studied last year is if you snap a guy as he's directly behind another guy, some of these coverage mechanisms, it may be 1st in, 1st out, or I'm going to play the new number 1, new number 2. But when they snap as this guy's flying a guy, it becomes completely ambiguous who your responsibility is. And it ultimately what happens is it simplifies what the defense can do. They may only have 2 or 3 answers to that type of motion. Is that something that you think is effective, underutilized? Did you have any thoughts in general?
Yeah, I actually, to your point, I read a really good paper. I think that was also Semifinalist about snap timing and how that is like a really important part of it, and how only like really good offenses and quarterbacks can really execute some good snap timing. And it's really important stuff. I think, yeah, like the snap timing definitely matters. If you can get it where the guy's directly behind you, the defense has no idea what to do. That's a great point. Yeah. And so there's definitely more research to be done on that too. But I thought that was super interesting to look into.
All right, now we're going to get into our 2-minute drill.
Okay.
All right. Sam's going to kick us off. We got 2 quick hitting questions for you. Now, candidly, guys, peek behind the curtains. We sent Matt the questions ahead of time, obviously, so he can prepare, but we have 2 that we didn't. So we don't know where these are going to go.
You ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. What's the biggest misconception in football analytics?
I think just kind of like I spoke on before, like some people would just take like these advanced stats with no context and just use it to argue why one guy is better than the next. And it's just, it's just really, unless you can have a practical explanation, like this stat matters because on the film, this is happening. It just really doesn't matter all that much. And you can't just combine a bunch of different advanced stats for a solution. Football is so complex. There's so many factors, the coaching, different quarterback play. It's just so many different games within the game. And I think just trying to explain it with a bunch of numbers is just not a good way to go about it. So I think that's the biggest.
Love that answer. Thank you.
And it helps now that there's so many like scrawny nerds who are going way up the ranks in NFL, maybe never even played a down of football, but they're kicking ass. And I was like, man, this is really encouraging and pushed back against the narrative of like, you never played, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. That's like me.
For listeners who want to break into football analytics, I think, previously there was a lot of barriers to entry. I don't know how to code. I'm not good at math. Whether they're coders, coaches, or just fans who want to learn more, what's the best piece of advice you'd give them?
Yeah, my best piece of advice would really just try to do the big data bowl because you can never know what happens. And it's so intimidating at first. Like it's like billions of rows of data that you have no idea what means anything. But I think like even if you don't finish the project, just getting hands on with that and just trying to fight through it, maybe looking up some tools along the way and trying to really tackle a very niche problem that you're kind of interested about. I think it helped me a ton with both my coding skills and understanding football and posting the results online. You can get a lot of different feedback from different people in the community. I know on X, there's a lot. I just think anywhere just getting something out there is really good. And there's some publicly available data. In R, you can use the NFL Fast R package for kind of some easier data sets. But the tracking data is really good because you can kind of understand why the outcomes happen rather than just having the outcomes of the play. So that would be my recommendation, and reach out for help. And it's a good community. So that would be my advice.
So if people do want to reach out or hear more from your, future content, if you plan on doing more research like this, where can they find you?
Oh yeah, they can follow me on X or just DM me. It's just at Polsky Matt, and then I'm on LinkedIn too. In the corporate world, so on LinkedIn's good for me too. But yeah, super excited to connect with some people who are hopefully listening to this and super passionate about football analytics. So yeah, thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. You're obviously very brilliant, and we really appreciate your insights. Thank you.
Really appreciate you guys.
Thanks.
Take care.
Awesome. So what a great interview. To my knowledge, he doesn't have a lot of experience like talking about football in front of people. So I think he absolutely killed it, and we're going to hear more from him in the future. What do you think?
Absolutely. Yeah, I loved hearing from him. I'm excited to see where his future goes, and I think it's very bright.
This is Bird Talk, a new segment, our weekly spotlight on a key figure inside the Eagles organization. It could be a coach, player, executive, anyone. Today, I want to shout out Vic Fangio. This is a guy who spent over 3 decades in the NFL before finally winning a Super Bowl. After talking to some people familiar with the coaching staff, I've heard Fangio's defensive installs are actually simple. A lot of people, I think, frame it as this like crazy, complex mastermind playbook. And I don't necessarily agree with that. You won't find a million exotic looks or wild new age concepts in there. Now, he does have a few, like being like having the weak safety against a 3-by-1 pick up any vertical from the number 3 so the middle linebacker doesn't carry him vertical. He uses that more than anyone. But to me, it's really the attention to detail, the technique that separates him. And that's on the field, on the grass. He's out there being like, no, you need to play your leverage like this. No, you need to have this foot forward, etc. I'm talking about spacing, timing. Defense is a coordinated dance, especially in this match carry deliver style coverage where you're picking up a guy as they come into your area, but potentially you're passing him off to a teammate. So that's where continuity comes in. That's where communication comes in. And you look at his disciples, they've copied the structure. They've got the playbook. It's quarters, split safety shells, sim pressures, spin guys down after the snap. But to me, where it falls apart is the fine teaching points on the field. And that's really the difference. It's not about the play call. I looked at charted play calls for the entire season. It's like cover 3, cover 9, cover 1, tricks adjustment, take away Zeus, take away the stud receiver. It's not like insane, exotic Mike Zimmer blitzes or Todd Bowles. So, in Philly, when you are able to pair that with players who are receptive, athletic, smart, good, and are good at communicating with each other, it pays off. Fangio takes that talent, gets everyone aligned, and turns what I think would have been a pretty good defense into one of the best we've seen in decades. And that's not through scheme alone, but really through detail. So just wanted to give a shout out to Vic. So any comments before you get into your bird talk, guy?
I really loved how you described Fangio. And the only thing that I would add is that he has answers for everything. And one of the things that I learned when I was in coaching and one of the things that Penn State and James Franklin, like a big philosophy, is you do your thinking beforehand. And I think that's something that Fangio does really well. It seems like they have answers to everything that have already been practiced thoroughly, and they have their answers already, in their head. So it's just muscle memory at that point. All the thinking is done in the classroom, and the best coaches are able to do that. And I think that just your whole point that just complements what you were saying, truthfully.
Absolutely. And then as you get into the game, making those halftime adjustments, we saw they worked magic in this past season because you have all those tools in your tool belt. You see what the offense how they're trying to attack you, and then you're ready to deploy these various tools. And in the second half, I mean, they shut down a lot of good offenses. So I think that's a great point. So I'm curious to hear who's your bird talk guy.
Well, you don't have to look too far on the coaching staff. I'm going to go the opposite side of the ball. Somebody that is a little bit of an unknown for the Eagles coaching staff, even though he's been there for a while. I'm going to go Kevin Patullo, offensive coordinator. And what's interesting about him, again, is that he is a little bit unknown because he hasn't really had a role really like this ever. And what's interesting about that is he's crucial to the Eagles' fate in 2025. And their offense is going to be judged pretty harshly because of the expectations that were created after winning a Super Bowl. Patullo is interesting. He's a Jersey native. He was a former quarterback and receiver for the University of South Florida. After an injury, he began his coaching career. He started also at South Florida in 2003. He's been coaching for over 2 decades now, including several stints in college and the NFL, including the Colts with Nick Sirianni. He has continued to build trust with Sirianni, but also presumably Hurts. Patullo held the role of pass game coordinator from 2021 to 2022 and was promoted with that same role also to associate head coach from 2023 to 2024. Following Kellen Moore leaving, he obviously got promoted. And he's really has seen the good and the bad with the Eagles. He's seen what has worked, what hasn't worked. And honestly, that's what's going to be really interesting. Is he going to be able to continue and carry over that success? Is he going to keep some of the plays the same? Obviously. Is he going to be able to make those crucial play calls and crucial moments? That is to be seen. In his most recent press conference, he was asked how different the offense will be. And I just loved his answer. And maybe it's a little bit of coach speak, and maybe it's just the coaching, side of me. But I love his sentiment about, elevating player strengths and trying to mitigate weaknesses and putting the players in positions to be successful. But I really think his key contribution comes down to continuity, organizational understanding, and as well as familiarity with the players and what makes them, great. So that's the guy I'd highlight. And I'm optimistic for the Eagles offense, even with this massive change.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see what he's going to do. I don't think it's going to be anything groundbreaking, as he alluded to in his press conference. It's new wrinkles. It's catering to the players. Obviously, we've heard this hubbub about it's Jalen's offense, which to me, I interpret it as they're going to cater the playbook to what their quarterback does best. Okay. Isn't that what you should certainly do?
See, you say that, but that's not always the case, right? I mean, there are I could think of a head coach in Philly not too long ago that his whole thing was, this is my system, you're going to play my system. And that obviously didn't work. I mean, they got a lot of wins under that specific head coach, but they never really did anything and made any noise. And so while that's like an obvious answer, not all coaches operate that way.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times they're like wanting to scale the complexity of their system with what they think the skill of their quarterback is, where sometimes I'm like, even if you have a great quarterback, it doesn't mean you need to reinvent the wheel and make things crazy. Sometimes you still want to give them a bunch of easy answers, easy primaries, check downs, keep things rolling. I think Detroit did an unbelievable job with that, where they've got a million different formations, but the concepts, it's pretty static. It's not, I mean, they're running a lot of digs, a lot of option routes, and they're building off of their run game. So it's one of the,
is Kansas City, right? I mean, they have arguably the best quarterback in the NFL. And yet the scheme benefits him so much. He doesn't have to make these crazy. He's capable of it. And I think it's fascinating because you kind of see it in his completion percentage over expectation. It's actually gone down. And that's not saying that he's regressed. I don't think at all. I think it's what it's saying is they're scheming easy answers and he's taking the easy answers. And I think that Detroit is also a great example, but I think I'd be remiss to not mention Kansas City in this example as well.
Yeah, and I think they just failed at receiver repeatedly after Hill left. Managed to make it work anyway. That's kind of a testament to Mahomes and Reed. Grant, I'll say this. I'll be on the record. I think Reed and Spagnuolo had a terrible game plan for the Super Bowl. Now, it's very easy for me to sit here as a Monday morning quarterback, understand that he pretty much got insta-sacked on half the plays, and you have no run game to speak of, and say it's a bad game plan. Spagnuolo specifically should have brought 7 man on the line and 0 blitzed or had some kind of disguised, sim pressures. I have no idea why he didn't do that. But, this is what gives parity to the NFL. You could have the best coaches, the best players, doesn't guarantee success. And I guess that's why we love it so much.
Couldn't have said it better myself, honestly.
All right. Teaser for next week. We're doing a mailbag episode. So please send us your most pressing questions in the comments or on Twitter at Eagles X's and O's. If you're one of those Eagles fans or even NFL fans in general who enjoys in-depth analysis of scheme, players, salary cap, analytics, and everything in between, we're trying to be well-rounded here. If you're one of us, every like, comment, sharing the video, it tells the algorithm, hey, push nuance football content out to the world. And that's how we fight back against the world of hot take media. So we sincerely appreciate if you shoot us a like, drop us a comment. I promise we read them all. I'm perpetually online. If you're new, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and you'll be notified of all of our future episodes when they go live. For people who watch the first few episodes, I think they'll say, hey, you guys really stepped your game up, and that's all right. We're gonna keep trying to do that, up the production quality, get awesome guests on here. It's already 10 times better with Sam. So, I'm Eagles Eric. That's Sam Finkel. And this has been another episode of The Edge.